Hey there, welcome to Authentically Raw. I'm your host, Jamie Berris. Today on the podcast, I invited my therapist friend, Missy Brophy, and I asked her to come because there's more of a heavier topic that I wanted to talk about, and it is that of shootings on campuses in our schools. Most recently, my daughter, she's a Michigan State student, and there was a shooting on her campus, and she is now home safe. And it has stirred up, across our country, so many things once again. And as a parent, over the last several years, it terrifies me, even when my kids get in the car and say, I ask about their day, and it's no longer just we had a fire drill, or when I was a kid, we would go in the hallway, grab a textbook, and I can remember doing the tornado drills, and that was frightening to me. And I can't imagine being a child, whether you're 5 years old in kindergarten or you're in your young 20s on a college campus, and having to do drills to prepare for active shootings. And as a parent, I don't really often know how to navigate it. I don't know how to talk about it to my kids. I don't know whether I should bring it up because I don't want to put some image in their mind that maybe isn't there and create, some sort of image that scares them and makes them anxious when it doesn't need to be. And at the same time, I want to talk about these things with them because I want them to be able to come to me and tell me what they're scared about, and we can talk through it. And so I asked Missy because we did actually deal with it. It is not anything that you can fully be prepared for as a parent, and for these students as well. I fear that we live in a time where I guess I went to school and I was carefree, and never in a million years did these sort of things, this violence cross my mind happening in my classrooms as I was walking across campus. And it's sad that this is the way things are now, but it is our reality. So I wanted to have this conversation to just bring awareness. And as parents, how do we talk to our kids? As kids maybe listening, what are some things, how can you reach out and get support if you're feeling certain ways? So Missy, what as a parent, my question is, what now? So I have a student, and you do as well, at Michigan State, and they're safe, they're home. Now what?
Supporting your kid wherever they are at. Some kids might experience, some kids experience a traumatic situation like this and go about business like it's just another day. It might not have an impact. Others, it completely devastates them. So one, look at where your kid is at, how they're reacting, how they're responding. Pay attention to the differences that you see in their behaviors. If you have a kid who's typically, happy-go-lucky, running around the house, and you're not seeing that, notice that, pay attention to that. If you have a kid who typically isolates themselves and is isolating themselves, even though that might raise some red flags because they're spending time by themselves, if that's something that they normally do, it might not be as much of a cause for concern. But
so that could be a coping mechanism that is healthy.
If you have a kid who typically isolates day to day, day in, day out, in regular life, it shouldn't be a surprise if they isolate after a traumatic event. That's the way that they deal. I'm not saying it's the greatest way to cope with things, but that's the way that some people deal. But you want to pay attention to your kid. You want to notice the differences. You want to support them. You don't want to overwhelm and pry and ask 10 million questions, but you want to be there for a support. So if they do have questions, or they do have concerns, or they just want somebody to sit with them without saying anything, That can be just as helpful. Like one of the biggest things that parents or friends or family members, for support is just being there. Like I know on Michigan State's campus right now, there are so many different just little activities going on, trying to draw people out, getting people together. I was just seeing today, they're doing, they had cow petting, like you can go and pet the cows on campus this morning. Like what a something to do to get out, to just keep your mind moving instead of just being stuck on replaying the fears.
Yeah. And does that help create a new image for them on campus? I think that is one of those things. What's the old saying? When you fall off your bike, when you're learning how to ride a bike, you just got to get back on and get back out there. And we hear all these different things. Yeah, they're going to close the campus for the rest of the year. Or no, they should keep it open. They should do this. And, who knows what the exact right thing is, because it's different for everyone.
Exactly.
And how I think sometimes I don't even know the questions to ask, how exactly do you need to be supported? Because as you said, maybe it is just sitting with them. Maybe your child needs that physical presence. You don't have to say words. Even the questions to ask, sometimes I don't know if I'm asking the right questions, and often we assume, well, if they're not coming to us with anything, they must just be fine. And when you said, like the cow petting, that is one of those where, yeah, let's get them all back out there. How do you know if your child is ready to jump back in, and should you push them versus maybe they're not ready and you keep them home? I struggle with that.
Well, and I think all ages, whether it's college students, high school students, middle school, elementary, they so take their cues from how you respond to things. So if there is something that goes on and your reaction is, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever, this is horrible, how are we ever going to move beyond this? They're going to pick up on that. If you can at least be a calm presence for them, even within chaos. Like, when you present it as, this is horrible. There's no getting around. This is a horrible situation. Nobody deserves to be in this kind of situation. It wasn't expected. And now everybody is stuck, trying to figure out a new normal and how to move forward. That's a much different response to have to your child. And they're going to pick up on that energy. And I know you were saying earlier about, well, what about if I have things in my head that I want to bring up or questions I want to ask, but I don't want to put images in their head? Chances are, especially for older kids, if they're high school and college age, if you're thinking it and you have concerns about it or you're wondering, they do too. And worst case scenario, you bring something up and they tell you they don't want to talk about it, they shut it down or whatever. At least you know that, and at least then they know that it's something that you're willing to address or not shying away from. Because if there's a topic that a kid senses that freaks you out or you don't want to talk about or you can't handle, they're not going to bring it to you. So and that's true. And that's with anything. That's not just with like the shooting that took place on campus. That's with anything. That's with substances. That's with sex. That's with relationships. That's with talk about suicide. That's anything relating to mental health and well-being. If your kid doesn't think you can handle it, they're not going to bring it to you.
We've gotten several people reaching out to us, texting and calling, how are you guys? How's the family? And, how's Tori? And I say, she seems to be doing good. And every time I text that, I'm like, I don't even really.
You're like, I think
truly
so.
know. Right. And I follow it up with, but she's not back at school yet, because I don't know how I would feel walking on the campus. I don't know how I would feel walking into a classroom, going into the dining halls and living in a dorm. And part of me is scared to ask because again, like I said, I don't want
You
to
don't want to know the answer
there.
if it's not. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to put fear anywhere, but I want to have these open conversations.
Meet them where they're at.
Give
Give them
they're
the
at.
information that they can handle and let them process that. And if they ask more questions, then answer more questions. Don't dump a bunch of stuff on them and expect them to sort it out, kind of, especially for the younger kids. But then, with the older kids, with the high school and college age kids, and especially with the kids who were actually, on campus when all this was going down, it's a completely different ballgame because there are so many different types of therapy that can be accessed to deal with this kind of situation, and you can take the kid's personality into account. There is talk therapy. We've talked before about EMDR, which is a completely different kind of therapy for someone who might have a hard time verbally talking through things. It's a therapy that can be used to help process and reprocess, traumatic events without doing all of the intensive dialogue.
EMDR, what does that stand for?
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Okay.
And that's a whole nother, that's a whole nother
but that's
20 minutes of time to talk about the details.
Right.
But there are a variety of, as long as you have a trauma-informed therapist, there are numerous options.
Well, and I even think for parents too, because it's nothing for then a parent to go to bed at night and they can't sleep because then we stay up all night worrying about our kids and we're anxious about them. And that, of course, we might think that we're trying to hide that from our kids, but they pick up on that. And or a parent's having a nightmare, or a parent can't send their kids away, and it's all around, and everybody needs something different. Some people, what's good for one person isn't right for the other, and
that's the good thing, that there are options. Something else that I do want to mention that is significant. There's a couple things. One, after an event like this, a lot of people who were close by, involved, or connected in some way, everything is going to be heightened. They're going to be stressed out. They're going to be anxious. They're going to be fearful. As time goes on, generally that subsides, and it might not go away, but it will lessen. If after 3 or 6 months it doesn't lessen, that's when if you haven't sought out therapy, you really want to get your child involved, because after any kind of traumatic event, everything is heightened for just about anyone. But if you don't see it lessening over time, that's concerning. Something else is if you have a child, or an adult for that matter, who has a history of any other kind of trauma, piling more trauma on trauma tends to, it tends to be significant, and it can lead to more difficulties than someone who's never experienced a trauma before and this is their first.
Right. And I'll be honest, it's crossed my mind that we have to do something right now, because I don't want all of a sudden it's 5 years down the road and it was never addressed and we thought we were doing fine, and then all of a sudden there's XYZ problems that we think are the XYZ problems, but it's really not. It's from back here.
Exactly. And you think of anybody who's dealing with what's going on right now, what is really important is the thoughts that each of us have in our head about the situation and what it says to us about, how we view the world, how we view the other people, our levels of trust. All of that are things that we want to be able to address early on, because if you have really unhelpful thoughts that are circulating in your head or your child's head and they're not challenged, then they stick and they almost become your reality or their reality. And the sooner you can address it and question it and kind of test those unhelpful thoughts as to are they accurate? Are they real? Where did they come from? And challenge that, then it doesn't stick. So you don't have a kid 20 years later who's got these thoughts that were never addressed and being accepted as fact.
And it makes me think of too, not knowing how to manage it and work through stuff, because we all deal with our stuff differently. I mean, some people just avoid it, pretend it's not there. Some people just stuff it down and then it just brews. Other people gloss it over, or, minimize it. And it might help temporarily for a hot second. Some numb it out. I mean, I think, well, I shouldn't say some. I feel like that is pretty widespread right now, and especially on a or a college campus. Well, if I just drink myself into oblivion every day, I won't think about it, or take whatever drugs, I won't think about it.
Yep. It's avoidance.
Right. Play video games.
Which helps in the moment. But the moment that you're not playing video games or drinking or binge watching a show, everything's still there and it hasn't been dealt with. That's where, especially for like the college age, high school age, sometimes it's not long-term therapy. Sometimes it can be doing 8 sessions of increasing your coping skills so that you know whether it's for this situation or any other situation in life that causes you stress, to be able to learn different breathing techniques, different relaxation techniques, mindfulness, whether it's yoga or meditation or ways to just bring down the levels of stress. That's going to help you in life, not just for this kind of situation. So you learn these skills and then apply it with everything. This is a huge thing that obviously needs to be addressed, but and also like skills like that, ideal situation is you have a kid in therapy learning them before they need them, because then you're practicing them coming at it from a calm place. It's much harder to practice them when you're trying to do that when you're already with a heightened sense of
and Lord knows they need these skills with social media.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everybody can benefit from coping skills is a buzzword, but everybody can benefit from it. I mean, coping skills help you to cope better with life. It doesn't matter if you're a kid, an adult.
Well, and I think exactly, because how we cope with everything is really, the scope of our lives, because we're all dealing with things and circumstances every single day. So and honestly, it's one of those things where, as a parent too, learning how your kids cope with things, in that if you have multiple kids, they probably all cope in different ways, and knowing, okay, this is how I meet this child, where they're at. And of course, having your own coping skills in check, because it gets hard to do. And personally, that's been a work in progress throughout my journey of parenthood, is not trying to take their emotions on as mine to fix. And I can tell you, those are the times that then I break down. I do not respond well. I react with, or, you're crying, or you get upset and yell. And really what you're trying to do is help them.
Exactly. And you want to help regulate them, but then you think, how am I going to help regulate them when I can't regulate myself? And that's where all the coping skills come into play. Because if you are highly agitated and trying to calm your child down or help your child to be calm, it's not going to happen. Yeah,
if I'm over there hyperventilating in a corner trying to send her back to school, it is not helping her.
It's like the old adage of when you're yelling at somebody, just calm down. It doesn't, that's not the way.
No, it creates more,
not the way it works.
Angst and chaos. Absolutely, for sure. So Tori has been sitting here the whole time listening to Missy and I's conversation, and I want to ask her a couple questions, because she did go back. So this happened on a Monday, and on Wednesday they had a vigil on campus, and she goes back to campus in 2 more days. You did go to the vigil the other night. Can you tell us, what was it like going, and what are your thoughts on being on campus?
Yeah, it was just kind of eerie being back there, and it was just so dead. Like, it was just a gloomy day. And just seeing, like, the people that were around campus, they were all going to the vigil, and said at that time, like, I even have class at that time of night when I'm on campus. And it's just nobody's walking around with backpacks going to their next class or going to go study or going back to their classrooms. They're all holding flowers and going to the vigil. And it's just weird to see, because it's just a normal Wednesday. Like, normally we would just be going to our classes and going on with our days. But it's like, just like that, it changes. And it's when it's like least expected. Like, you never thought it'd happen to you and hit that close to home. The night it happened, I was off campus at a friend's apartment. So being kind of farther away, it helped. And I felt a lot safer in the moment. My biggest worry was just my friends that are on campus, and we were listening to the police scanner and just hearing so much about my friends' dorm buildings and even my dorm building. And after the lockdown was lifted, we could return back to our dorms, and we didn't go like the main part onto Grand River. We kind of went around it, but pulling into my dorm building, it was just everyone was leaving. Like, it was just looking around, everyone's brake lights were just on, like all their cars were on, and everyone's walking out just holding all their bags and their pillows, and parents are already down there. All the parking spots were just filled with cars trying to leave. And just like looking around, it was like a slow motion moment, just so surreal, because it's like 1 a.m. Like, this is the busiest I've ever seen it. And then the next day when I was going to leave, it was just already like no one was there. The parking spots were empty. There was a few like parents waiting for their kids to go bring them home. And it's just so weird because it was just a Tuesday morning. It was just like a movie scene, seeing all of it.
Well, I think it's really important to know that, like, what you're saying about the feeling like you're, like you're watching it in a movie, and it's surreal and it's slow motion. All of that is a really common effect of trauma. There's a name for it. It's called, it's feeling detached or feeling dissociated, because your brain is trying to make sense of something that kind of doesn't fit with what you normally know and normally see. So it's almost like you are, it's almost like you're watching yourself in the situation. And those are the kind of things that effect can be really common. And that's where, like we were talking about earlier with the coping skills, like learning grounding measures and mindfulness measures to try to keep yourself in the present can be really helpful, so that your mind doesn't always go to that detached place time and time again. And there, because even experiencing what you did, like when you describe, like, the night and all the car lights and things like that, it's really important for you to start to be aware of that. Those are things that you kind of like attach to this event. So you want to be aware, because in the future there might be times that you're out at night and you notice car lights, and it might bring you back to that moment because it can be a trigger. Like, those are things that are really important for you to start to be aware of for yourself, so you know what might be triggers, so that you can be ahead of the game.
That night, my only thoughts were just like, oh my gosh, this is so awful. Like, those victims, it was just a normal day for them, and just like that, their lives were changed. And even for the people that were in the classrooms or at the union. But as time has gone on, like the past few days, I'm starting to see the effects of it on myself, which I didn't even like take into consideration those first few hours. I'm just kind of more scared of the world now, because it was really just so not expected. Like, you'd never think it would happen to you. With Oxford happening in Michigan a little over a year ago, it's just like you see that and it's like, oh my gosh, that's so sad. Like, it's awful that it's happening. It was like in Michigan, just so crazy to think of. But one of the things for me is like, I never thought of how the students view the world after and just their day-to-day lives. I just thought, oh, it's so awful. Like, it really probably affected a lot of them, but I never thought of just their normal lives. For me, it's just with the noises, like, yeah, I think you dropped something the other day, Mom, and like even just hearing like whatever dropped, like I just froze. Like, it just, like everything just freezes and my heart just drops. And like last night I was home alone for a while and I didn't even want to leave my room. Like, I'm just scared of anything and just the world. With lots of other students around Michigan and just people that know kids that go to Michigan State, they're all saying that this whole situation just hit way too close to home, which it did, but for all of us students there, it did hit home.
Prayers for the victims, their families, and the entire Michigan State community. Stay Spartan Strong. Thank you so much for being here as we kick off this podcast together. I really appreciate you joining me on this journey, because I'm well aware you could be doing or listening to anything right now. Hey, if you enjoy the Authentically Raw content, please support the show by following, rating, and reviewing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can also follow me on social media for daily inspiration. Head over to my website, jamieberris.com, to sign up for weekly transformation tips. Or if you're interested in coaching, I currently have 3 openings for one-on-one coaching. If you're looking for an empowering community, we'd love for you to join us in the Transformation Tribe, our group coaching membership. More info available on my website under the Life Coaching and Membership tabs. One last thing, I'm rooting for you. Be real, be raw, be authentic.